The sky over Delta X-43 cracked open with thunder, but it wasn't just weather this time. A human reconnaissance pod spiraled down through the dense jungle, smoke trailing behind it. It slammed into the thick mud beside the murky swamp, scattering amphibious creatures and glowing insects. The pilot inside groaned as the hatch sparked and hissed open. His name was Jace, a ground technician who wasn't trained for survival, let alone war. He had been sent to check Cum's arrays on the far rim of the jungle sector. Nobody told him the swamp was now a war zone. He didn't even know whose war it was. But the second he stepped out and heard the scream in the distance, he knew this place was no longer safe. Twisted trees leaned overhead like silent watchers. The water rippled with hidden movement. Jace clutched a small tool knife in his shaking hands, stepping carefully as his boots sank deep into the sludge. The emergency beacon was damaged. No one was coming. That's when he heard something growl. Behind him, he turned quickly, but there was nothing. Just bubbling water and the soft buzz of glowing beetles. He moved again, but the growling returned closer this time. The air grew heavy. Every leaf seemed to stop moving. Then from the fog, a creature lunged out, teeth like broken blades, eyes glowing with pure hunger. Jace fell back with a cry. The beast was covered in scales and wet fur, standing on 4 legs but moving like a serpent. It hissed and pounced, claws flashing. Jace rolled just in time, slashing at its face with the knife. It roared in pain but didn't stop. Another one joined in, crawling from the water with a blood-soaked mouth. He screamed again, stumbling into the swamp, slipping and choking on water. They chased him, one snapping at his arm and tearing part of his sleeve. Then a loud pulse shook the air. The creatures stopped. A second pulse. Then a flash of green light cut across the swamp and struck the lead predator in the skull. It dropped, unmoving. Jace looked up, coughing, just in time to see her appear. She rose from the swamp like a shadow given form. Her armor was sleek and sharp, grown from her own body, alive and breathing. Her skin was radiant blue, her eyes golden and glowing. Her long tendrils dripped with swamp water as she stepped forward, pulling a glowing spear from her back. The remaining predator leapt at her. She moved too fast for Jace's eyes. The spear spun in her hands, slicing the beast clean in two. Steam hissed from its body as it fell. The Huntress stood still, silent, as if waiting for more. But the jungle had gone quiet again. Jace backed away slowly, unsure if she was here to help or finish him off. But the alien girl looked at him, her golden eyes narrowing not in threat but in curiosity. Then, without a word, she stepped through the water and knelt before him. Her hand reached out, not to harm, but to lift his chin gently. He froze, breathing hard, unable to understand what she was doing. Then she spoke not in English, but her voice had weight. It shook the air softly, like music through metal. Her tone was firm, but not angry. She pointed to his wounds, then pressed her hand over his chest, just above his heart. Jace didn't move. He didn't understand her language, but he understood her intent. She was protecting him. She had killed the predators not for sport, but to save him. Why, he didn't know. Maybe he reminded her of someone. Maybe it was a hunter's code. Or maybe she had just claimed him like a prize rescued from death. As he struggled to stand, she wrapped one arm around him to support his weight. Her strength was effortless. She moved like a warrior, yet her touch was gentle. Her armor shifted, adapting to the movement, and she kept her glowing spear ready as they moved deeper into the swamp. Jace wanted to ask questions, but he could barely breathe. His body ached, and every step was agony. Yet with her beside him, he felt strangely safe. She didn't let him fall. She didn't let go. Whatever she was, she had made a choice, and that choice had saved his life. They vanished into the mist together, a human clinging to life and an alien huntress guarding him as if he belonged to her now. Jace could barely keep his eyes open as the alien Huntress helped him walk through the thick swamp water. His legs dragged behind him, one arm slung over her armored shoulders, and the other pressing against the wound on his ribs. He had no idea where she was taking him, but he knew he didn't have the strength to go anywhere else. The swamp changed. As they moved, the water grew shallower. The trees glowed with hanging vines, pulsing with a soft light. Strange creatures peeked from branches, but none dared approach her. Even the air felt warmer now, as if her presence kept danger away. She walked with calm steps, scanning the area as if she knew every shadow. Jace glanced up at her, still not believing what had just happened. Her armor looked alive, shifting slightly with every movement. Small glowing symbols pulsed across the metal as if responding to her thoughts. She wasn't just a warrior. She was something more. Something the swamp itself obeyed after what felt like hours. They reached a cave hidden behind a curtain of vines. She brushed them aside and carried Jace inside without hesitation. The inside glowed with crystals along the walls, casting soft blue light. She gently placed him on a bed made of soft leaves and moss before stepping back to observe him. Jace winced in pain as he adjusted himself on the makeshift bed. His shirt was torn and his body was covered in bruises and cuts. She knelt beside him without a word, opened a small pouch from her armor, and pulled out a glowing liquid in a curved glass vial. With care, she poured it onto a cloth and pressed it to his side. The liquid burned at first, making Jace clench his teeth. But soon the pain faded, replaced by warmth. His skin tingled, and the bleeding slowed. He didn't know what it was, but it worked. He whispered a quiet thank you, even if he knew she wouldn't understand his words. She looked at him silently, then nodded once. Jace tried to sit up, but her hand pushed gently on his chest, keeping him down. He looked into her glowing yellow eyes and saw no anger, only focus. She spoke again in her strange tongue, the sound soft and rhythmic. It almost sounded like a song, like words meant to comfort a frightened child. He closed his eyes, letting his body rest. For the first time since the crash, he felt safe. The cave was warm, and the danger outside felt far away. Her presence filled the space like a shield. She sat beside him, unmoving, like a guard keeping watch. Her spear rested across her lap, still glowing faintly. Hours passed. When Jace woke again, the pain had eased. His side was wrapped in soft bandages made from alien plant fibers. The Huntress had not left. She was still there, watching the entrance. He wondered why she had saved him. He wasn't important. He was just a technician, not a soldier or hero. But to her, that didn't seem to matter. Jace sat up slowly, catching her attention. She turned her head slightly, waiting to see what he would do. He pointed to himself and said his name, Jace. She blinked, then pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Veari. He repeated it back. She nodded once more. It was the start of something fragile and new. They spent the next hour exchanging words and gestures. Jace pointed to objects and said their names, and she responded in her language. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. They laughed once when he called her spear a toothpick, and she mimicked stabbing him with a grin. The bond between them was growing, even without full understanding. Night fell outside the cave, and strange sounds echoed in the jungle again. Veari stood, her spear ready, and peered through the vines. Her body tensed as she spotted movement in the distance. She didn't speak, but Jace could tell something was coming. Something dangerous was near once more. She turned to him, gave a short signal with her hand, and he understood. Stay quiet. Stay down. Her golden eyes flashed, and she moved like lightning out of the cave entrance. He heard the crackle of her weapon and a screech outside. The ground shook, and glowing flashes lit the swamp beyond the vines. Jace wanted to look, to see what was happening, but he trusted her. She had saved him once already. Now he could only wait, heart pounding, hoping she would return before the danger reached him again. Jace sat in the cave with his heart pounding as the distant flashes of green light faded. He gripped the side of the mossy bed, his muscles tense and his breath short. The jungle outside had gone silent again, but silence didn't bring peace. Here, the entrance shifted, and Veari stepped through the vines. Her armor shimmered under the crystal lights, splashed with the dark blood of something not human. Her glowing eyes found Jace instantly. He felt a strange relief when he saw her. Standing there, unharmed, she walked over to him without a word. Her movements were quick, but graceful. She looked down at his side to check the bandages. He wanted to speak, but his throat felt dry. She didn't seem to expect words. Her calm hand pressed gently against his ribs as if to check if he was healing. Well, Jace gave a small nod to show he was okay. Veari gave a nod back, her face still unreadable. Then she turned away and sat on a rock near the wall. She took out her glowing spear and placed it across her knees, her eyes watching the cave opening like a guardian. He wanted to understand her better. Not just her words, but her thoughts. Why did she save him? Why was she protecting him now? She could have left him to die, but she didn't. He owed her his life, and yet he still felt afraid of her world. The swamp outside was not just dangerous. It was alive in ways he couldn't explain. The glowing insects, the whispering trees, the shifting lights in the water, they all watched and moved with purpose. He was not welcome here. He was an outsider trapped in a world that wanted to eat. Veari stood again and motioned for him to follow. Jace hesitated but nodded. His body still hurt, but he could walk now. He limped slowly behind her as she led him out of the cave and through another path hidden by thick roots. The light outside was dim, painted by the green glow of the strange jungle. They walked in silence. Veari moved with the same silent strength she always had. Jace tried to copy her steps, careful not to make too much noise. The ground squished beneath his boots, and odd shapes moved in the water beside them. He tried not to look too closely. They reached a hill that rose above the swamp. From the top, Jace could see further than before. In the distance, he saw ruined metal structures covered in vines and moss. Alien towers bent and broken, like a city lost to time. Veari pointed to them, her expression serious. He understood. That was where they were going next. She wanted to show him something. Maybe answers, maybe danger. He looked at her and nodded once. She responded with a slight tilt of her head, then led the way down the other side of the hill. The path narrowed, and the trees thickened. Strange animal calls echoed in the dark. Veari stopped suddenly, raising her hand. Jace froze in place. She crouched low and pulled him beside her behind a thick root. Ahead, shadows moved, large ones, armored like beetles but walking on two legs. They carried weapons that pulsed with light. Their armor was marked with red and silver symbols. Jace didn't recognize them, but Veari did. Her body tensed. Her eyes narrowed. These were not swamp beasts. These were soldiers. Dangerous ones. Jace whispered, "Who are they?" But Veari didn't answer. She only made a quiet gesture to keep low and stay quiet. She took a small blade from her side and held it between her fingers like claws. Her body became still as stone, ready to strike if needed. The soldiers passed without noticing them. Veari waited until the last one vanished into the mist. Then she stood and helped Jace to his feet again. He could see the concern in her eyes. Whoever those people were, they weren't friends. They were hunting something or someone. Veari picked up speed. Jace had to push himself to keep up. They moved fast now, deeper into the glowing jungle. Vines brushed his arms and strange birds flew overhead. The wind changed direction, carrying the scent of smoke and oil. He knew that meant machines were nearby. They finally reached the edge of the ruined towers. The ground here was harder, covered in broken metal plates. Veari stopped and looked back at him. Her voice was low as she spoke her language, pointing to the ruins. Then she pointed to herself and to him. She was warning him. This place was not safe, but it held answers. Whatever was waiting inside these towers, it would change everything between them. Asterisk, the broken towers loomed high above the glowing swamp, their metal bones twisted by time and covered in creeping vines. Strange lights blinked inside them, some flickering like old signals. Jace stared up at the nearest structure and felt a chill crawl down his back. Vayari moved ahead, stepping carefully over cracked platforms and rusted machinery. She didn't hesitate. Her movements were sharp and sure, as if she had walked this place many times before. She held her spear in one hand, the tip glowing faintly in the green mist. Jace followed her slowly. His body still hurt from the crash, and his heart was heavy with worry. He didn't know what waited in these ruins, but he could sense it wasn't just the past. Something alive was here. Something that watched from behind broken walls and shifting shadows. They entered the base of the tallest tower. The air inside was still and cold. Metal panels lined the walls, and glowing roots grew through cracks in the floor. Faded symbols covered the walls, written in a language Jace couldn't read. Vayari ran her hand over one of them, her expression dark. A faint humming sound filled the room. Jace turned in a circle, trying to find the source. One of the panels on the wall lit up as they approached. It flickered to life, showing old footage of strange armored figures. They were not human, but they were not Vayari's kind either. The images showed a battle. The swamp was once a city, filled with light and life. Now it was dead and drowned. The recording showed one of the enemy creatures firing a blast that shattered the ground. The screen went dark, and silence returned to the room. Vayari looked at Jace. She didn't need to speak for him to understand. This place had fallen to war, and those same enemies were back again. The ones they saw earlier in the jungle were not scouts. They were part of the same force that destroyed the city long ago. They moved deeper into the tower. The stairs creaked under their weight, but Vayari moved without fear. Jace climbed slowly behind her, keeping one hand on the wall. They reached a wide chamber with a large round window. From here, the whole swamp could be seen stretching far and wide. Suddenly, a sharp sound rang out from below. Metal hitting metal. Then came voices. Not Vayari's language, not human either. Jace froze. Vayari ducked beside the wall, motioning for him to do the same. He obeyed at once, pressing his back against the cold steel. Several armored soldiers entered the lower level. They were heavily armed and moved with perfect formation. One of them scanned the room with a floating orb. It rose slowly through the tower, humming louder with every second. Vayari looked at Jace and raised 2 fingers. She pointed to the far side of the chamber, a crawl space, just big enough for him to fit. Jace nodded and crawled inside, holding his breath. The metal was tight and smelled of rust. He waited, heart racing, as the orb floated just inches from his hiding place. The light passed over him but didn't react. It continued scanning and moved away. Moments later, he heard Vayari's sharp cry and the sound of metal clashing. She had revealed herself. She was drawing them away from him. Again, she was risking her life to protect him. Jace crawled back out and looked over the ledge. Below, Vayari fought with speed and fury. Her spear danced through the air, striking hard and fast. The soldiers tried to surround her, but she moved too quickly. One by one, they fell to the floor, motionless, but more came. A new wave entered the chamber with larger weapons. Jace knew she couldn't hold them off forever. He searched the room and found a panel glowing softly. He didn't know what it did, but he pressed it anyway. A loud alarm echoed through the tower. The new soldiers turned toward the sound. Vayari took the chance to strike. She brought down 2 more before leaping back up the stairs. Jace met her at the top, helping her over the final step. Her arm was cut and her breathing heavy, but she gave him a nod of thanks. They didn't speak as they left the tower. The jungle swallowed them again, but something had changed. Jace was no longer just a passenger. He was now part of her mission. Whatever it was, he was in it with her. They ran through the jungle as fast as the terrain allowed. Vayari moved ahead with sharp focus while Jace followed close behind. Her arm was bleeding, but she ignored the pain. He could see it in her eyes. She was determined to get him somewhere. Safe before anything else found them, the sky above began to change color. Soft green light shifted to pale orange as the planet's day cycle turned. Strange birds cried in the distance. Jace kept stumbling but forced himself to move. He didn't want to slow her down. Not after everything she had done for him. Vayari led him to a rocky ridge hidden by thick vines. She cleared the entrance with one swing of her spear. Inside was a quiet space with dry stone walls and glowing moss. It was not a home, but it was shelter. They could rest, at least for a little while. Jace sat down against the wall and let his body relax. His limbs ached, his chest burned, but he didn't complain. He watched Vayari tend to her cut silently. She used a glowing salve and wrapped it with tight green cloth. Her movements were careful and practiced. He wanted to help her, but didn't know how. He reached into his gear pouch and pulled out a small survival pack. Inside was a protein bar, water capsule, and a flare device. He handed the bar to her. She looked at it curiously, sniffed it, then took a bite without hesitation. She handed him half of it back. He smiled and ate it gratefully. The simple moment between them said more than words. Jace felt something growing inside him, trust, respect, maybe more. But he pushed that thought away. This wasn't the time to be confused. He opened the flare device and looked at it. It was standard issue, only to be used in extreme emergency. He turned it over in his hands and frowned. The flare would send a beacon to orbit, but he had no idea if anyone was even up there anymore. Vayari noticed his focus and moved closer. She pointed to the device, then to the sky. He nodded. Yes, it called others. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She shook her head and pointed to the jungle, then mimicked soldiers with weapons. She was warning him. Jace understood. If he used it, others would come, but not just humans. The enemy might detect it too. It was a risk, a big one. He placed the flare down between them and leaned back, lost in thought. Her golden eyes stayed on him the entire time. Then something strange happened. The device began blinking slowly. Jace hadn't activated it. He picked it up in confusion. The flare was receiving a signal, not sending. A short pulse repeated over and over. He checked the tiny screen on the side. A single word appeared again and again. Survivors. Vayari stood quickly and raised her spear. She didn't understand the word but recognized the tone in his voice. He showed her the screen. She stared at it, then reached out and tapped the signal with her fingers. A soft humming started from deep within the jungle. Jace and Vayari moved outside the shelter and looked toward the sound. In the sky, far in the distance, a blue flare exploded into light. It was faint, but it was real. Someone else had activated a beacon. They weren't alone on this planet anymore. Vayari turned to Jace. She spoke softly, one hand on her chest, the other pointing toward the flare. He knew what she meant. The signal changed their path. They had to move toward it. There might be answers there, or more danger, but they couldn't ignore it. He nodded slowly. She helped him to his feet again. Her hand was strong, steady, and warm through the armor. They packed up quickly and stepped back into the jungle. Every sound felt louder now. Every shadow looked deeper. Something was shifting in the air. They traveled for hours. The light faded and returned as the sky cycled. Again. They crossed rivers of glowing algae and climbed over broken machines swallowed by roots. All around them, the jungle whispered. Jace kept glancing at the flare device. The blinking was getting faster. When they finally reached the source, they found ruins unlike any they had seen before. These weren't alien, these were human structures. Twisted towers of earth-made metal and antennas bent under alien growth. The signal was coming from inside. Jace looked at Vayari. She gave a short nod. He stepped forward into the ruins of a forgotten human outpost, with his alien protector by his side. The metal beneath. Jace's boots cracked and groaned as he stepped into the ruined human outpost. Plants had grown over the walls and machinery. The air was thick with dust and the smell of rust. Somewhere nearby, the flare device continued to blink. Vayari followed close behind him, her spear ready in her hand. Her eyes scanned every corner of the hallway. This place made her uneasy. It was built by a species she barely understood. Yet the feeling of death inside these walls was clear. They passed by shattered screens and toppled chairs. Symbols from Earth were burned into the walls. Jace could read some of them: warning signs, power room labels, emergency maps. They told a story of something gone wrong. Very wrong. He found a power terminal and wiped the dust from its surface. The screen was cracked but still faintly alive. He tapped a few buttons and the system flickered. A single message kept repeating in red across the screen. Secure area. Do not approach. Vayari narrowed her eyes and pointed to a nearby stairwell. Without speaking, they moved toward it. Their footsteps echoed in the hollow base as they descended lower into the facility. Jace's heart beat faster with every step. At the bottom, they found a large chamber. The walls were covered in vines, but through the growth, Jace saw something shocking. Cryopods. Dozens of them. Some broken, others still glowing. Inside one, a human face stared out through the frost. He rushed forward and wiped the glass. The person inside was young, frozen in time, their body curled in sleep. The pod still hummed with life. Jace turned to Vayari with wide eyes. She stepped closer, her expression unreadable. The flare signal had led them here. It hadn't come from someone walking. It had come from this pod. A timed emergency beacon, likely set to go off after a number of years. A last signal in case no one ever came. Jace checked the console next to the pod. It still responded. The name of the person inside was Elias Kern. The mission tag listed them as a science officer. Jace didn't recognize the name, but that didn't matter. What mattered was he was alive. He looked at the unlock controls. The pod could be opened, but it would take time to defrost. Hours maybe. And it would draw attention. The system used a lot of power. Vayari seemed to understand the risk. She stepped back and checked the hallway again. Jace activated the process. He wasn't going to leave someone here. Not when he had the chance to save them. Lights blinked on the side of the pod as warm mist began to fill the chamber. The ice around the man's face started to melt. Suddenly, a sharp sound came from above. Vayari moved instantly, grabbing her spear and pulling Jace behind a crate. The sound of metal footsteps echoed down the stairs. 3 of the enemy soldiers appeared, scanning the chamber. They were dressed differently than the others. Heavier armor, higher rank. One of them spoke in a low voice, and the others spread out. They had tracked the flare signal too. Now they were here. And they were armed. Vayari whispered something to Jace, and handed him a small device from her belt. He held it tightly without knowing what it did. She moved like water, silent and deadly. In one swift move, she disappeared into the shadows behind the pods. One of the soldiers passed near Jace's hiding place. His breath stopped as he crouched lower. The soldier paused for a moment, then turned away. That moment was all Vayari needed. Her spear struck fast and hard, dropping the first one instantly. The second soldier turned and fired. But she rolled to the side and struck again. A burst of green light flared in the dark. Jace couldn't look away. She moved like a ghost, never slowing, never missing. But the third soldier grabbed her arm and threw her across the room. Jace didn't think. He leapt from his cover and slammed the device into the soldier's back. It lit up and exploded with electric force, sending the enemy into the wall. Smoke filled the chamber. Viari got back to her feet and looked at him, surprised but proud. Together, they cleared the room. Silence returned. The cryopod beeped softly as the final stages of defrosting began. Viari stepped beside Jace and gave a quiet nod. For now, they had won, but others would come. The jungle was not finished with them yet. The cryopod made a soft hissing sound as it finished the final defrost cycle. Inside, the human named Elias Kern stirred for the first time in years. His eyes fluttered open slowly. Fog drifted from the edges of the glass and his fingers twitched. As warmth returned to his body, Jace stood close, watching with wide eyes. He had never seen someone come out of cryo before. Viari stayed behind him, her golden eyes fixed on the entrance. She didn't trust the silence. They had fought off one wave, but she knew more would come. Elias coughed and gasped for air as the pod unlocked and opened. His voice cracked as he tried to speak. Jace helped him sit up, handing over a water capsule from his gear. The man drank it quickly, still shaking. His eyes darted around the ruined room in confusion. "Where's the team?" Elias asked with a weak voice. Jace didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed to the broken pods nearby. Elias followed the gesture and saw the truth in their silence. His shoulders sank as the weight of it hit him. "They're gone," Jace said. "You're the last one." Viari stepped forward and placed a hand on Jace's shoulder. Her look was calm, but her body was tense. She pointed to the walls and made a motion with her fingers. It meant danger was coming. Jace nodded. They didn't have time to explain more. Elias tried to stand, but his legs were too weak. Jace lifted him with effort and wrapped one of the man's arms over his shoulders. Viari led the way through the corridor, checking every corner and hallway as they moved deeper into the structure. They reached a broken lift shaft. The main exit was blocked. Viari looked up and saw a ladder that went all the way to the roof. She pointed to it, then looked at Jace. He understood. This was their only way out now. He started to climb with Elias holding on tight. Viari climbed below them, covering the rear. Her spear was strapped across her back. The metal creaked under their weight. Jace felt sweat run down his back. Each step felt longer than the last. When they finally reached the top, they rolled out onto a flat landing pad. Wind blew across the open platform. The sky was dark with clouds and flickering light. In the distance, strange shapes moved above the trees. More enemy flyers. They had spotted the beacon too. Time was running out. Viari stood at the edge, watching the jungle below. Elias collapsed onto the floor, breathing hard. He looked up at Jace and asked what year it was. When Jace told him, his eyes widened. He had been frozen far longer than expected. His mission was ancient. But now he was caught in a war he didn't recognize. Suddenly, a sharp whine cut through the air. Energy blasts rained down on the landing pad, exploding near their feet. Viari pushed Jace and Elias behind a stack of metal crates. She drew her spear and stared down the attackers who dropped in from hovering ships. 3 soldiers touched down, armed and armored. They didn't speak. They raised their weapons and opened fire. Viari moved like lightning, knocking aside bolts with her spear's glowing shaft. She ducked under a blast and struck the nearest enemy with full force. Jace pulled Elias farther back and picked up a loose metal bar. He had no weapons, but he wouldn't just hide. He waited for the right moment, then swung at the second attacker. As it passed, the blow knocked the soldier off balance. Vayari finished him with a clean strike. The last enemy raised a grenade and shouted in his language. Vayari ran toward him, knowing what was about to happen. The grenade glowed red. Before he could throw it, she slammed her spear into his chest. The weapon exploded in his hand as he dropped. The blast threw them all to the ground. Dust and fire filled the air. Jace coughed hard and crawled to Vayari's side. She was injured. Her arm was badly burned, and part of her armor had cracked. But her eyes were open. She was still fighting. Elias dragged himself up and pointed to the sky. A signal beacon was pulsing again. But this time, it was not from the flare. A human rescue ship was inbound. They had seen the tower battle. Help was finally coming. Vayari tried to rise, but her legs gave out. Jace caught her before she fell. He didn't say a word. He just held her close as the light from the approaching ship grew brighter across the sky. Asterisk. The rescue ship roared above them as it lowered toward the landing pad. Its lights swept over the platform, casting long shadows across broken crates and scorched metal. The wind from the engines kicked up dust around Jace and Vayari as they stood side by side. 2 armored humans dropped from the ship and rushed over. They wore clean gear, marked with Earth's insignia. One of them checked Elias quickly and gave a thumbs up to the medic team behind. The other pointed at Jace with confusion, then noticed Vayari and paused. Jace held up a hand, blocking their weapons. "She saved my life," he said firmly. "She's with me." The soldiers exchanged looks but didn't raise their rifles. The one in charge nodded once and lowered his voice into a cum device. The tension faded slightly as the team focused on evac prep. Vayari stood silent through it all. Her golden eyes never left Jace's face. Her armor was cracked, and her body still weak, but she looked proud. She didn't speak the human's language, but she didn't need to. Her place beside him said enough. The ramp lowered. Inside the ship, white lights glowed along the walls. Jace helped Elias up first, handing him to a medic. Then he turned and extended his hand to Vayari. She hesitated for just a second, then took it and stepped aboard. As they lifted off, the swamp below faded from view. The jungle's glow became a blur beneath the clouds. Vayari sat beside Jace, watching the world vanish through the window. She had never left this planet before. Now she was rising toward stars she had only seen from below. In the medbay, they cleaned her wounds and tried to scan her armor, but the system didn't understand her species. Jace stayed close and explained everything he could. Some crew members were wary, but none challenged her presence after hearing the full report. The captain reviewed Jace's files and listened carefully to every word. Then he leaned back in his seat and looked over at Vayari through the glass. "She's not human," he said. "But if she risked her life for you, she deserves protection." Jace nodded. "She didn't just protect me," he replied. "She claimed me. In her way. I think I belong to her now." The captain raised an eyebrow. "That's not standard procedure, but I won't argue with a man who walked out of a swamp war zone with a living legend at his side." They were transported to a larger station orbiting a nearby moon. It was filled with humans, noise, and polished corridors. Vayari followed Jace without fear. People stared, whispered, and stepped aside as she passed. Some looked with awe, some with fear. But none stepped in her way. Scientists asked questions. Commanders requested debriefs. But Jace refused to leave her side. She had bled for him. He would not let bureaucracy separate them now. After all they had survived, she was more than a rescuer. She was his future. Late that night, inside a quiet observation deck, Jace and Vayari stood alone by the window. The stars stretched out beyond the glass, endless and beautiful. He looked at her and spoke slowly, pointing at the stars and then at her. "You're free now. You don't have to stay." She tilted her head slightly, then stepped forward. Her hand touched his chest gently, right above his heart. Her voice was low but strong. She said a single word. A word he had heard once before in the jungle, right? After she saved him, he didn't know its meaning then. He understood it now. It meant mine. Jace smiled and placed his hand over hers. He didn't need a translator. Her presence had changed him. He had seen death, war, and survival. But through her, he had also seen loyalty, strength, and something he never expected to find on a deadly world. Love. Vayari stayed, not as a prisoner, not as a visitor, but as an equal. Earth accepted her slowly. The stories of the Huntress who saved a human spread like wildfire. Some feared her. Many respected her. And one man stood beside her, always. Together, they walked the halls of ships and cities. Two worlds united by chance. One life saved by another. And a bond that no war or species could break.